Hello everyone. So, I am thinking that yeah, I'm not sure if anyone's going to jump on here this morning. That's fine. So, just in case you don't know who I am with this live stream going on, I am going to be doing this type of live stream on another channel called Deepthink Arts. But this morning, I promised myself I'm going to do a live stream no matter what, and there was an issue with my account, so I'm doing the live stream here because I have to do it. And then hopefully I'll be able to upload this to my other channel. If not, I suppose I can just refer people over. But anyway, so yeah, I hope everyone's doing well this morning. I'm gonna see if we can get some people to come on here. I am really excited about all this. So this morning we're going to be talking about just some art things in general, and then we're going to be kind of breaking down a story. And I apologize for my voice. I've been kind of losing my voice the past couple of days. I think it's just because of allergies and stuff. But yeah, so very excited about that. And the reason why I really wanted to do this live stream was because I finally have my Tuesdays off, and so I am going to be creating as much content on a Tuesday as humanly possible. So I have like 3 projects that I have to get done today, plus someone's coming over, plus I'm teaching a dance class, but we'll see if I can power through this. So all right. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So I'm just seeing if there's anyone who wants to jump in on here. So just a moment. Probably should have done this before, but I was like, nope, I'm gonna start at 8 o'clock. I'm gonna start at 8 o'clock. I feel like it's really important if you have a schedule for yourself to just stick to it, because regardless of whether it's gonna be perfect or not. I've been listening to this podcast. It's called The Inner Tube, and it's by a couple of people that they just create really good, funny content. And they were talking about how it's really important to put out consistent content and also to put out quality content. And it's interesting because with YouTube now, it's like, what's more important, right? Quality or the quantity. And I kind of fall in the middle. I feel like it's important to be putting something out, but also like I feel like it should be like a 80-20 rule, where 80% of your work is really, really quality, and 20% of it can be kind of mine's probably going to fall into more like the 70-30, because that's just kind of how things roll around here, because I don't have the time. Like, I know how to make things super polished. I mean, I'm working to get better, and I think you should always be working to make your craft better, whatever that is. But it's just really difficult to take the time to have everything super nice when you only have like one day. So as time goes on, I'll be able to do that more. But yeah. Okay. Okay. Story stuff this morning. Okay. So, let's see. This is going to be mighty interesting each week. So what I'm going to try to do is every Tuesday at 8 o'clock, I will be streaming, just no matter what, unless I'm deathly ill or something, and then I'll let everybody know. But yeah, so that's kind of what I've decided to do. The reason for that is because I wanted this to be kind of like an hour-long class where I can basically talk about anything. And then also it'll be really fun if we start building up a community of folks who come because I would love to hear what other people's thoughts are on art. We can have discussions about that, and then we can also have, you know, I am so up for friendly debate. I absolutely love debate, and we can also go and do. What was the other thing I was thinking of? Oh yes, just helping people like with their homework, helping people with different things that they might be doing in school if they're struggling, because I absolutely love writing, and I absolutely love what do you call that? Just any kind of English stuff and all that jazz. So I'm going to leave this up, so if anybody comments, then maybe I can see them. I mean, I don't have my glasses on, but anyway. So, grabbing my notes. All right, so sorry for that long intro. But this morning, we are going to be talking about why the arts. Why are the arts even important? And it took me a long time to really understand why the arts were something that were revered in the eyes of, you know, of people who are in the school system and whatnot. And what I really figured out after a while was that, number one, they don't really teach us art in school. They teach us art mechanics, and it's very different. So there's two forms of art that I think are really important, and there's visual and there's written, and that basically just encompasses all of the arts. What they've done is they've replaced the visual arts with art mechanics. And so what I mean by this is when you go and you take you know, a pen or pencil and you start drawing something, you can draw a really beautiful picture and it's not art, which I think some people, they never graduate past that. So, oh yes, someone just said, hey, I hope I'm saying this right. Is it Cesar? I hope I'm saying that right. But yes, musical arts, yes. I think musical arts to me is almost like a written art because of the way that it kind of, well, it's sort of written in a way, because to me notes are almost like words. So, and you know, when you actually produce art or produce music, it's kind of written down on the paper and everything. But you're right. So that's another form of art, which is actually, I can't believe I kind of forgot about that one. But I think a lot of times I'm such a visual person, and I love music. I absolutely love music. Music is more like soul food to me or something like that. But so with the arts, I feel like what they've done is they've taken it and they've made it so that it's just you have your art mechanics so that you can draw something, but you're not connecting with it on a spiritual or emotional level, right? And then they've done the same thing with the written arts. When they have and they've totally done this with music, which is terrible. But with the written arts, what I've noticed is if you take away the history, which are from people, they've taken away they've taken away the ability to really communicate well through language, because what they've done is they've made the vocabulary so much smaller. And I was raised on very old writings, and so when I go back and I look at my my primers and my the things that I used to read, the language in them is so much richer and so much deeper. You have so much more ability to communicate. And I'm not the greatest verbal communicator. I'm a much better written communicator. So doing these kinds of things is difficult for me, but I like stretching myself and trying to do it because I feel like it's important to be able to communicate in all forms. So anyway, with the arts, if you only have art mechanics and you have people who can draw beautiful pictures, but you don't have people who can speak to the soul of something, then you've lost the power of art. Because what art is supposed to do is when you look at it, when you read it, or when you hear it, it's supposed to do something to you and move you. And not everything has to be art. Like, you know, when it comes to music, sometimes I just like something that sounds nice. I think the danger comes in with what we have now is this constant stream of EDM almost everywhere, right? We have, you go into the grocery store, and I was actually really annoyed because there's this grocery store that I love that they used to play nothing but 80s music, and you walk in there and there'd be like Michael Jackson going or something like that, and you just felt a level of connecting with other humans. And now what they've done is they've replaced it with EDM, and there's some EDM that's really good. It depends on how, it's just like a plant, or food, depending on how it's grown. And so I think if you're taking sounds, which is interesting because if you're coming from, there's an artist named Pogo who he takes sounds from old movies and other places that have connected with the human emotion, and when the song is played back, it contains all those emotions. And so I think that can be very, very powerful. And sometimes I think people don't understand the power of maybe their own art until someone else tells them why their art is affecting them. And so, a lot of people have connected with that music, and then, it's like, oh, all this nostalgia is coming up because it's connected to these other, either these old movies that they've seen before, or even just the fact that it is something that's older that had a human emotion connected to it, because the energy behind whoever was making that art form, then now it's kind of plugged into this new art form. So they have, but they've taken that away from us, and they've given us these droning sounds that are just awful. So I'll do sometime I'm going to be doing a comparison between music from like the 80s and then music from today, and I want people to hear them side by side, because sometimes when you're just listening to it in your car, or you're listening to it all the time, you don't understand or grasp the difference, because you get used to one. It's like a frog in boiling water, right? You get used to it. I listened to nothing but EDM for I think a whole year, and then I just got fed up with it. I was like, this is stupid. This is dumb. I can't do this. And it really was. It was the lyrics to a song that got me just to shut everything off. But then I immediately switched from EDM to classical, which I don't listen to classical as much now. But like, I could feel my brain starting to work better. So music is very, very powerful. So thank you to Cesar for bringing that up. And so today, the second topic that I had for us was morality in the arts. Hi, where'd it go? Nice to see you. So I have no idea who all is going to come on here. This will be really fun. So, morality in the arts. This is a topic that I think can be kind of touchy, but I was thinking about this the other day because I think sometimes as artists, and if all my fellow artist people, shout out to me if you feel the same way, but sometimes I feel like there are so many more important things for me to do than just get money, and so sometimes I'm really not very monetarily motivated. Like, I know that I need money to live, obviously, but sometimes I think as artists we get really distracted by the passion for our art, and so we don't think about money as much. And because of that, I tend to not be as business minded, which can be positive and negative. And a lot of times what I see with, I get really turned off by businesses that are all about they're making a profit, which is not a bad thing. Making a profit is not bad. But if you think about making like, to me, when I think about making a profit, I want people to purchase, something of mine, or use a service of mine, because I'm also a dance instructor. I want people to come to me, not because I need the money, but because I have something to give to them. And when they give me money, I want it to be almost measuring back the positive feelings that I gave to them. So I'm not just there to be like, okay, get on my dance floor, fine, I'll teach you a couple things, and then we'll send you home and you'll give me cash. I want it to be like, come into my studio, I want to give you this wonderful experience, and if you feel as though I've given you something valuable, then I want you to return that to me in some way. And so to me, when I look at money, I almost measure it in like positive feelings versus just cash, because there's there's so much, people will kill each other for, you know, for green paper. And it just makes me so sad. I'm like, why is this, you know, why are people so driven by money? And but when it comes to an artist, I think you have the power to kind of step back and say, you know, I want we just have different brains, and so you want to be able to say, I have something that's valuable, and I'm bringing this to the table, and I want other people to value it as well, and I'm not as interested in the money side of things. And so with that being said, I think that real artists are really turned off by things that kind of screw people over. And so when I see, like, you know, the latest, you know, boy band or the biggest blockbuster film, and you know in your heart that it was just to make money, it's like all the artistry kind of goes away. And there's a lot of times those types of movies or arts or whatever, they are they're really they feel soulless. You walk into the movie, or you listen to the music, or you know, even paintings and stuff, you know. And I honestly, like, I'm in an area where there's a lot of modern art, like modern painted art and sculpted art and things like that. And almost every time that I see it, it just feels so soulless. It doesn't feel like there's anything that's going on behind it. And I think one of the reasons why we see this is because there's a lack of morality. And if you're an amoral person, or if you believe in subjective morality, then you get a lot of the screw people over mentality. Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, Vertigo. Yeah, because it's you know, you're putting your soul out there, and you're connecting with something that's far greater than just money. You're making a statement, or you're trying to pull people into thought. And so not everybody is going to have that same calling on their life, right? Some people, you know, build roads. Some people build buildings. Some people, you know, teach people lessons. Some people cook. And we need everybody. And so I think sometimes artists get a little bit egotistical when we're like, well, we're so important because we're artists. And or on the other end, people think, oh, I'm nothing, I'm just an artist, you know. And that's not true. It's just you have a certain way of looking at the world that you add to the community. And so what you have to say is important. But if you don't have a standard of morality that says, like, I'm not going to use my art to hurt people, or to, you know, I'm not just putting something out there to, you know, like an earworm just to get money so that, you know, people, you know, it's about you're as an artist, your goal is more than just making money. It's about really saying something to someone that's worth hearing. So I wanted to read this comment really quick. Purchasing a painting or a good book is basically paying to feel emotions, which is not a bad thing. It starts to stink when what you are buying is empty, made only for the revenue. Exactly. And that's what I see happening, is that they can pump out so much stuff that has nothing to do with real art. It has nothing to do, because to me, art is about two things. It's about either making you think deeper, which is why I call this Deepthink arts, or it's about connecting you to an emotion that is real. And what I started to notice, especially in the music industry, is obviously this just transfers to all arts, but the ability to manipulate people, to get them to do or think or feel what you want them to, by applying certain rhythms, getting, you know, sending certain messages through words. If you're listening to nothing but people saying, go to the club and, you know, and have sex and blah, blah, blah. If you're hearing that message all the time, it really does mess with your mind, and it'll start changing your emotions, whether it's for positive or for negative, you know. And then there's other things that might manipulate you to feel happy all the time, which might not necessarily be a good thing. What if you need to sit with a sad emotion and work through it? So, but people at the, you know, in those industries, they will do that because they're driven by money. And as a real artist, you need to kind of stand up against that. But that means that you have to have some moral standard and say, I'm not in this just for the money, nor am I in this to get people to do what I want them to do. I think as an artist, sometimes we can be a little bit manipulative. And for me, I'm a teacher and an artist. And so what I desire to do is to teach people through the arts, but not in a manipulative way, because I want people to come to their own conclusions about things. I can present something and I want them to feel different emotions. I want them, yeah, to feel sad about this character, or yes, to feel sad about this point in the story. But then they need to draw their own conclusions on why. And that's why, like, I'm sure we've all read those stories, like I kind of call them the middle school stories that make you cry, but they really do make you think about things, you know. So there's usually, you know, a dog that dies, you know, where the red fern grows, those kinds of stories. But they help frame our existence, and they help us understand tragedy and love and life, and they encapsulate all of life. I just watched a fabulous movie. I would recommend it to all of you guys. It's called Flipped. It was made in 2010. It was really well done. It was a very sweet film, and it was about this boy and this girl who live across the street from each other for years, and the girl has this crush on the boy, but she doesn't really know him. And then as the story unfolds, it does a lot of double takes, which is really fun. So it would kind of play out a moment of the story, and then it would, like, maybe a couple minutes later, wind back and show you the boy's perspective, and then it would wind back even further and show you a broad perspective of both of them. And so it was a really interesting story. And as the story progresses, the girl really comes to understand who the boy is and loves him for a deeper reason. But it wasn't just focused on this boy-girl romance. It showed how, because romance is a framework, right? It's a framework for a lot of things. I think there's so much romance in life that people never embrace or understand because they're too busy tunneling into themselves. And, you know, we run around like black holes going, mine, 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 mine. You know, what can I find that will fill me up? Instead of becoming a creator and then connecting with other creators. You really are not going to be happy if you're running around trying to suck life out of things. That's why, as an artist, it's so important for us to produce things and to make things that connect with other people, because it's like being a fountain. You know, a fountain isn't supposed to suck things in. You know, a fountain is supposed to spring up and give water and life to other things. Anyway, okay, so where was I going with that? But yeah, so anyway, morality in the arts. You need to be if you're going to be a real artist, you have to stand up for something, you know, whatever that is. And you might, you know, everyone is going to differ on some opinions on things, but when you start using the arts as an excuse to abuse people, I'm very strongly against using the arts to show what I guess would be like degrading material. And that doesn't necessarily mean that sometimes you don't need to see something nasty and gnarly, because I think you do. But when you are upholding that as something that's good, that is when I have a problem with it. Because if you uphold things like you know, just all the debased things. We know what they are. I don't even need to say them. But if you hold those up as like, yeah, this is a good thing that you should try to strive for, you're sending that message out basically to the universe saying, like, this is what we want. And, you know, people laugh and things at like quaint, good stories. And there used to be a lot more of them, and now there's less of them. But what I think is interesting is that human beings have never changed who they are. Like, we are, you know, I come from the perspective that every human being is kind of a nasty little person, and then you have to train yourself and learn what is good, and then, you know, if you do, you know, everything responds better to you, because that's what we're supposed to do. But we don't do that naturally. Like, if you go to a playground with children, you're going to see them be nasty to each other, because that's just the nature of human beings. But if we uphold those nasty things and say, yeah, just try to get away with it as much as possible, and we uphold that in our art, and we revere that in our songs, and we revere that in our movies, and we revere that in our literature, then guess what's going to happen to everything? Everything will start to reflect those morals that we're constantly bombarding ourselves with. And I think it's really dangerous when you try to split off the artistic personality and say, like, well, half of me is going to be, you know, like this, or like some of me is going to be this dark side that I'm going to revere in the arts, and then some of me is going to be kind of good. You have to embrace all parts of it, and that's why I love the story that I'm going to kind of dive into today. And I do think that you have, as an artist, you cannot be afraid of your dark side. You can't be afraid of it, but you have to use it in the proper way. It's kind of like being born with fangs and claws. As an artist, you have a lot of power because you can directly influence someone's emotions, and you can directly influence someone's thoughts. Think about all the things that you've been influenced by either movies, books, TV, songs. They shape who we are. They shape, you know, everything. And so if you as an artist are kind of flippant and be like, oh, whatever, it doesn't matter. What you're putting out visually in front of somebody, what you're putting out audibly in front of somebody, or in the written form, is it leaves a mark whether you want it to or not. So as an artist, you have a responsibility, I think, to say, what kind of world do I want to shape? What do I want to say? What do I want to do? And what kind of world do I want around me? And what do I want to come back on my head? And so then you can dig into your art and go, okay, this is what I want to do. And that doesn't mean that art always has to be pretty, always has to be beautiful. I definitely don't think that. I think that sometimes the most powerful forms of art can be ugly. I remember when I was going through, I've been through a lot of, you know, just different anxiety phases, and I think a lot of artists do. I think it's something that goes along with the artistic personality. But I remember having like really OCD thoughts, and there's if you ever want to, like, you know, look into that or discuss that with me, I would be more than happy to do that, because I think it's just a really interesting thing that people don't talk about very much, and I think it's something that affects a lot of young people and even older people today, but just because of so many different factors of our environment. We live in such bombarding environments. But basically, they were just thoughts that I couldn't control, and they would be really, really disturbing. And I remember seeing artwork that looked exactly like what was going on in my head, and it was really like disturbing artwork, but it comforted me because I felt like I'm not the only one who suffered through this. And then I went and read the backstory on the artist, and they had a very similar story. And this was from, you know, hundreds of years ago. And I don't remember the artist's name. It was some like, I think it was like a Catholic artist. I can't remember, but it had something to do with it had something to do with like kind of seeing evil forces like coming into your brain, that kind of thing. But it was just really interesting because it showed me, oh, there's another human being who's had this experience. And I think sometimes as artists, we are so into being novel that we forget that it's about connecting the human experience. So don't be afraid to draw back on what you know. Don't be afraid to draw back on, you know, experiences that other people have shared with you, because, you know, the art is not just about rising up like this, you know, monument. Sometimes you do, and you know, and you break new ground and show new things, but there really is nothing new under the sun. And the most powerful thing is when you call back on an emotion, because I think we have such a wide range of emotions, and then especially as kids, you really feel a lot of things, but then when you get older, it's like you forget what certain feelings are, and everything gets shrunk down to just the few, you know, love, hate, like, dislike, you know, and it gets shrunk down. So you need to call back to those old feelings of whatever that is. Maybe it's something very it could be something really, really simple, like walking into your classroom and, you know, sitting down at the table and it's the first day of school. Everybody gets like that resurgence of that feeling. There's no word for that feeling, right? But there is, but everybody's felt that. And so calling back on those things and going, oh yeah, the human experience is so broad, instead of shrinking everything down to romance between one man, one woman, over and over and over and over, or action adventure over and over and over and over and over. You know, call back on the grander scope of the human experience. And I also think that like with, you know, all the social media, everything's become such a little bullet point that we've lost the grand structure of things. There's no more like sitting on the porch with grandma and talking about your day and getting this broad structure and being really well-rounded. And as an artist, if you are just sitting in your home and you're not like getting out and talking with other people, you're going to be shrunk down. You're really going to be shrunk down. And you can't just just eat art and then produce art, because art is reflection of life. So you need to go eating life, and then you can absolutely draw from other sources, but draw from life itself and then produce your art. Okay, so now let's go ahead and dive into The Shepherd's Castle. So this book is, the reason why I'm dressed this way is because when I do a story or whatever, I'm going to kind of dress in character. I just thought that'd be kind of fun. I've always wanted to do that. So if you can see the front of this book, this is called The Shepherd's Castle. This was written in the 1800s by a man named George MacDonald. He was actually very influential on the popular writer C.S. Lewis, if you've ever heard of him. He was the man who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. And so this book, it has forever in my mind been one of the best archetype stories. And when you start really getting into the framework of story, one of the most interesting things to me is that the hero directly reflects the villain. And I remember when one of my teachers told me that in high school, it was just my whole world opened up, because I started comparing all the heroes to all the villains in every story that I could find. And if it's a good, well fleshed out story, the hero will be the exact mirrored opposite of the villain. And this story is also really not afraid to go into some scary places. So that's the other reason why I really like the story. It's pretty gritty, and and gritty in the sense of, there's not like blood or anything like that, but it definitely dives into the darkness that dwells in mankind. And I really like those stories, because I think that a lot of times in today's age, we want to just believe that we're good, and we ignore the bad, and then we wander around going, will someone validate that I'm good? Will someone validate that I'm a good person? And we long for that, but we're unhappy even when someone does validate that we're good, because we know that we're not. It's kind of like when a little kid does something that's wrong, and then they, go to their friends or whatever, and they're like, was that okay for me to do? They're like, yeah, that was fine. But they know that, like, if mom or dad caught them, then they'd be in big trouble. So they feel guilty, but they're not going to do anything about it, right? So I think that that's the attitude of a lot of adults. We run around and we try to justify the bad stuff that we do, and say, well, I'm a good person. And then we're miserable because we know that we're not, but we're asking everybody to validate that we are. And even when they do, we know that it's a lie. So we're depressed, So just admit the fact that you're not good, and then start from the bottom, and, and work your way through it. Because it's more scary to hide from yourself and to stuff everything in the closet than to go down in the basement and actually pull stuff out, bring stuff out into the light. So, this story is set in Scotland, and someday I would love to turn this into a movie. I would absolutely love that. So this whole story takes place in Scotland, and there's a shepherd boy named Donald. And he was someone who loved to read and loved to learn, and he wanted to be a teacher. And so he went to a school, and he went to college. And this is back in the day when college was actually like very it wasn't everybody went. It was a huge privilege if you got to go. And so he ends up wanting to become a tutor, and so he lives on the mountains with his parents, and so he goes down into the town and he leaves his parents behind. It's kind of his becoming a man story, and so he goes to this castle called Castle Graham, which I will show you guys. It's really hard to see the interior of the entire castle, but there it is. And this castle, if you've never read one of these stories, they're really fun, but you have to find one that's good. That's why I like this one. So it's kind of this gothic story. And so this castle, it has the whole, is it haunted type feel. And so he meets two people that are really important. He meets, and I've heard this pronounced two ways. I'm going to pronounce it my way. Someone said Forgu, and someone said Forg. I like Forg better. So anyway, there's the Lord Forg, who is the son of the Earl of the Castle. And the Earl of the Castle is this man who is you know, as a character, it's just such a fun character. He's this gaunt, bony man who just there's something wrong about him when you first read the story, but you don't know quite what it is. And it talks about, like, I should find a description of him, but kind of yellowy eyes and just someone who's very kind of walking death. Donald, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. So he's brown from working in the sun. He's broad-shouldered. He's you know, so he's physically astute. He, you know, his eyes are clear. He's, you know, he's kind of rosy and full of life, and so complete opposite of the Earl. And as this story continues, what we find out is that there is this music that's coming from somewhere in the castle, and nobody knows what it's from. And so Donald becomes the tutor to a young boy who lives in the castle, and his name is Davy. And so he and Davy become really good friends, and Donald's constantly trying to teach him just how to be a good man, and how to you know, how to be honorable and decent and all these things. But he does it in such a way that's very very simple, very plain. And what I love about Donald is that he's a poet, and so he'll use his poetry sometimes, but then sometimes he'll just turn around and make it so simple that Davy's like, oh, well, you know, that's a really easy concept. And there's this whole idea as a teacher, sometimes you have to be complicated, and sometimes you have to be simple, and it depends on who your student is. If your student is someone who thinks that they are really high and mighty, sometimes it's best to just throw it back at them and give them something that's really simple, because it you know, it ruffles their feathers, and they go, oh, you know, I'm so much more complicated than that. And then another student might feel really, you know, like they're lacking in knowledge or whatever, and if you give them something that's sort of complicated, and they work through it, they go, oh wow, I really can figure stuff out. So it depends on who your audience is and who your student is. And so Donald is just a really good teacher because he's in tune with his student, and I absolutely love that. And on the other hand, his father, the Earl, Davy's father, is completely out to lunch, hardly ever sees his son. And that's something that we see with a lot of people today. You know, if the father is just absent. And as a man, if you are a man, you have such incredible power. You are the one, like women, we can try all we want to change the world. And we do, and we can, but it takes, for every like ounce of energy that you put out into somebody, we'd have to put out like 10 pounds of energy. Because a man walks into a room, and if they have a presence, and if they know where they stand, if they're a good man, the world just changes as soon as that man walks into the room. Whereas a woman, we have to fuss and talk, and there's just a lot of things we have to do in order to make someone listen to us or to obey us. And we have to, you know, it's the whole idea of mom versus dad, right? Mom comes home and, did you do your homework, and blah 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 blah, and you know, it's this blah 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 that's going on, and the dad comes in and goes, son, and then the kid just, you know, you have such incredible power, and most men just throw it away. Don't throw away your power, guys. Don't throw it away. You know, and use it for good. Some, you know, a lot of times men just want to use their power for selfish reasons. So, you know, they're trying to see how much money they can get, how many girls they can get, whatever, all that stuff. It's not going to fulfill you. It won't. And if you are a good man and you use that energy, whether you never have your own kids, I don't care, but go and give your energy to kids, and just teach them something, teach them a skill, teach them anything, and it's so rewarding. It's amazing. And if you start cultivating that presence of, like, I want children to feel safe in my presence, I want other human beings to feel safe in my presence, I want to be someone who, you know, stands up for what is right, and you do that, you become, it's like being a true artist. You become a fountain where people can come to, and instead of just trying to suck things out of the world. So anyway, okay, so we have dinner with the Earl, and at this dinner party that the Earl has, the Earl slips Donald some hallucinogens. And it's really interesting because it's really interesting to hear, like, about, you know, you forget that drugs were, you know, drugs are such a problem now, but drugs were a thing way back in the day. And so, you have this whole thing where Donald is really confused about where he is, and he doesn't know what's going on, but it's a very pleasant experience for him. And then he wakes up and he thinks, oh my goodness, did I drink too much wine? Like, and he's embarrassed about it because he feels, you know, like I was not in control of my capacities, and I don't know what happened. I don't know if I lost control with my drinking. I don't know. And so then, but the Earl is very kind of suspicious, and then Donald starts suspecting that the Earl did something to him, but he wasn't sure what it was. And then we meet Lady Arctura, and Lady Arctura is the owner. She's going to be the owner of this castle, but right now the Earl is in charge of it, and then as soon as she comes of age, which is in about a year, then she'll be the owner of the castle. And Lady Arctura talks to Donald, and they both exchange the fact that she had been experimented on by her uncle. And what I really like about this story is it's not afraid to dive into how ugly a man can be, and also a woman, which we'll get to in a little bit. But the Earl is someone who is absolutely selfish, and he does not talk to either of his sons, and he does not talk to his niece, who's Lady Arctura. And he experiments on his niece, just for fun, and so he gave her a bunch of drugs, and they really messed with her, and they made her very weak, and so she has a really hard time just kind of with maintaining her strength and all that stuff, and so she's becomes kind of a sickly person because of what her uncle did to her. And she doesn't hold malice in her heart towards him, but she just doesn't trust him. And if you've ever met someone like that, where there's someone who is just doing something for their own pleasure, and you almost feel bad for them because they don't even know what it's like to give something that's good to someone. They've just become this utter black hole where all they can do is try to take from people, and they can't give anything anymore. There's nothing life-giving giving in them anymore. And that's what the Earl became. He just became this vacuumous black hole that just keeps sucking, any energy, any life into himself. And so, if he sees someone that's good, he wants to taint it and make it bad. And then as the story progresses, I want to get into this framework, I guess, because I don't want to tell the whole story. But the framework of the story is that the Earl ended up having, or a long time ago, his wife, he did not marry her, and he actually had her locked away in this room, because what he would do is he would see how much she would still love him while he tortured her, basically. And so he had her chained up to a wall at one point, and it sounds really like it's they do it in such a way that you don't see all this happening, and it doesn't dive into it in the dialogue or anything, so that you're not walking side by side with the villain as he does these things, because I think that almost desensitizes you, which is what I see happening with the 50 Shades of Grey. I don't want that in my world. I have a lot of little dancers. I don't ever want them to grow up and have that experience with a man. I don't want that experience with a man, but what happens is they draw on our dark side, because we get intrigued with darkness, and so people start putting more and more of that out. And if you take a little nibble of the dark and a little nibble and a little nibble, it'll just drag you down a rabbit hole. We only have 15 minutes left. Okay, so as the story goes on, what we see is that this man was so driven by his insecurity that he wanted to see how much he could torment this poor woman, and see how much she would still love him. And she did. She was it's really interesting, because as a woman, we can be very, very forgiving. I mean, I know that it's kind of propagated that women are heartless and cold, and there's a lot of women that are, and there's a lot of women, especially if you didn't have a good dad or good men just to see in your life, you can become really heartless, especially after someone breaks your heart. I think the trick is to have a breakable heart, to have a soft heart, and to be like a sponge so that things can pass through you instead of being like a stone wall, right? A stone can break, but a sponge, you can pierce it, and it's not gonna damage the whole sponge. So she was locked away in this room, and I don't remember it in the story. It's a little bit confusing, actually. I've read this story many, many times, but I think what happened was she ended up dying on this, she ended up being chained to this bed, and she was dying there. And she wrote the Earl a letter and said, I still love you. You know, no matter what you've done to me, I still love you. And that's just a very, very, very powerful message, because you know, if someone has a lot of darkness in them, but we choose to still love them, there's something about that that's redeeming, and then they can be drawn towards the light, hopefully. Although some people are just such a black hole that even if someone's saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, they can't receive it, or they can't understand it. Because love isn't just validation, right? You can go to someone and say, you're doing something that's wrong, but I still love you. And a lot of times nowadays people equate validation with love, and it's just not true. Because you have to be able to correct, and you have to be able to correct someone, or bring something to the table to them, and put it forward and say, you know, this is something that's bothering me, this is something that's wrong, you're doing something that's wrong, I still love you, I'll walk through this with you, or I'll walk, you know, or I will still be putting, because you can't always walk side by side with someone through their stuff, unfortunately. Sometimes you have to take a step back so that they can really figure out their power and see who they are in the universe. And if you try to walk alongside them, they'll just be limping along, you know, holding on to you. And it's like, no, it's time for you to use your legs. It's time for you to use your wings. So anyway, there's at the end of this story, the Donald. He and Artura go down into this basement where this lady had died, and they find out what was going on down there, and they clean everything out. And it's just such a beautiful picture of really expunging the darkness from like the basement of your soul. And sometimes when we face our own darkness, it can be really, really frightening, but it's also very, very powerful. So when you go down into the basement and you really sit with like, who am I really? What have I really done? What are the darknesses that I have? What are the strengths that I have? And you really sit with those. It can be incredibly powerful, and you have to have no fear, you know. And so, but anyway, what I loved about the framework of this story was that, for as dark as the Earl was, we see the light reflected in Donald. So the Earl was someone who took advantage of people, who wanted to have them so validate him that he was willing to hurt people in order to do that. He was someone who had no moral compass anymore, and he was just completely doing whatever his whims told him to do. And whereas Donald is someone who he is very self-sacrificing. He's someone who wants to put light in where there is darkness, where the Earl wanted to hide everything. Donald is someone who wants to be in his right faculties, whereas the Earl wanted to just, you know, lose his mind, kind of. Donald is someone who wants to pursue relationships with people that benefit them, not just taking. And so this whole story is just, it's a really beautiful comparison of literally light versus darkness. And then I just thought of another comparison. The whole basement thing, it's like kind of this dungeon area. That's where the Earl kept his, you know, this woman. And Donald actually lives in the very, very highest place in the castle. And whether that was done on purpose, I don't know. But I always find it interesting, because a lot of times you'll find that where your hero lives is reflective of their internal state, and then where your hero lives is reflective of their internal state. And that doesn't always pop into the, you know, the conscience of the author. It's just something that happens as the story develops. So I would like to break this story down a little bit more over the next live stream. And what I would like to hear from you guys is, I would like to hear just different stories that you have either read or created that deal with kind of human darkness, and that will be, I guess, my theme for a little while, just for maybe like the next couple of weeks. But I want to break down some of the elements in this story that just actual story elements, because it's helpful as a writer to know how to write a characterization. Sometimes we have an idea in our head, but we can't always flesh it out. And then just as an artist, you know, whether you deal in music or whether you deal in painting or whatever, I would just encourage you to kind of think about what is the purpose of your art. What are you trying to say? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to make the world a better place through your art? And that can be done through ugly art, through beautiful, through beautiful art, through, it doesn't have to be perfect to be art. I think that's the other thing that we get hung up on as artists. We get so caught up in like, it must be perfect, that we forget that it's the message that's more important. The message will change people's lives, not necessarily how perfect it looks. How many times have you gone to a movie that looks perfect, but it didn't have any substance? So perfect looking things, even perfect sounding things, perfect written things, don't hold any weight if the message isn't there. So I would just encourage you today to sit with, what is my message? What am I trying to say? Is it worth saying? Is it something that will benefit other people? Is it something that's growing my soul? Because art is all about growing the soul and growing the mind. And if anybody has any questions, I don't know how many people are here now. Oh, 3 people are here. Hi, 3 people. I would be interested to, just hear anything that anybody has to say, if anybody has any questions or anything like that. We have about 5 minutes left. For those last 5 minutes, I think I'm just going to give you guys a couple recommendations. So I have been listening to, what was that? There's a very interesting artist right now named, I don't know, it depends on what style of music you like. I like everything. It just depends on, like I said, what the message is. So there's an artist named Elliot Marks. I would recommend checking out his stuff. He does rap, and it's just really interesting, all the topics that he talks about. Might not agree with everything that he says, but I just find it really interesting because he has a very strong message, and he's definitely an artist. He writes his own music, produces it, makes his own, he designs clothes and all kinds of stuff. So he's really an interesting person, and he's very young. I think he's like in his early 20s, like 21, 22, something like that. So if you want to support him as an artist, that, you can go check out his work. For other things that I would recommend, oh yes, I was gonna say this in another video, but as an artist, it's really important about what your landscape looks like. So if you are someone who has something that you do like as a little ritual to kind of get your space ready, I would love to hear about that either in this stream or in another stream. One of the things that I've been kind of getting into is, and people are going to be like, oh, essential oils, but I've actually been doing more essential oils, and I do find it really helpful. I find it helpful for when I get up, I find it helpful for when I'm trying to focus on a project, and I find it helpful for when I am going to bed. So it's, I use like a little diffuser. I'll show you guys the next time, but it's great. And so if you can kind of make your space really, if you can make the energy in your space really good and very, I don't know, I like to say zen, it doesn't always have to be zen. Sometimes it can be exciting and whatnot, but create an environment around yourself that makes you want to produce more art. Don't let yourself get into that tunnel factor where everything's a mess and you just feel like the world's imploding in on you. Grow out of that and create a space that you really are proud of, and then as you create that space, you'll find that you're able to produce more and more art. All right, well, I am going to go ahead and sign off. I apologize for being so rambly. This is my very, very first live stream, so I'm excited about where this is going, but I know the first ones are always a little bumpy. So thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you guys have a fabulous day. Blessings, and I will see you guys all very soon. Nope.